Coming to you live from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome to Africa Focus, where we bring you news from across the continent right here on Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Start interacting with us on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya, at Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Chacha. Send in an SMS via 22999 free of charge. But first, here are stories making headlines. Japanese experts have said the major oil spill caused by a Japanese ship that ran aground in Mauritius may pose a long-term threat to the region's ecology. British law firm clears Botswana ex-leader of money laundering. 21 inmates killed in Madagascar prison break. We begin with Africa Roundup stories.
The Democratic Republic of Congo on Tuesday declared the end of a 25-month outbreak of measles that claimed the lives of more than 7,000 children aged under 5. The outbreak was countered by vaccination on a massive scale in which millions of children and infants were immunized. Measles is a highly contagious viral disease that attacks mainly children. The most serious complications include blindness, brain swelling, diarrhea, and severe respiratory infections. Once common, the disease has been rolled back around the world thanks to a cheap and effective vaccine, but low rates of immunization among a community can cause infection to spread quickly. The first cases of measles in the latest outbreak were recorded in June 2018. As of January this year, the WHO had recorded more than 335,000 suspected cases of the disease, of which 6,362 were fatal. By way of comparison, the DRC, a vast country the size of continental Western Europe, had recorded 9,891 cases of coronavirus, of which 251 were fatal. An outbreak of Ebola in the east of the country, which was declared over on June 25th after nearly 2 years, killed 2,287 people. The announcement in Kinshasa came ahead of an expected declaration Tuesday by the UN's World Health Organization that wild poliovirus had been eradicated from Africa. Health teams have been fighting to wipe out polio's last vestiges on the continent in northeastern Nigeria, where jihadists said vaccination was a conspiracy to sterilize young Muslims. Several thousand people welcome in Kinshasa the opponent Martin Fayulu, who called in a meeting for reforms for the early elections in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where tensions erupted a few months ago within the ruling coalition. Several districts of Niger's capital, Niamey, were submerged in floodwaters on Tuesday after heavy rainfall caused the Niger River to break its banks. Homes, rice fields and market gardens were destroyed as the Nigerian government asked residents to evacuate affected areas of the city. Almost all of Niamey's 1.5 million inhabitants live on the banks of the river, and some have even built their houses in its bed. Niger, one of the world's driest as well as poorest countries, often experiences intense rainy seasons which typically last 2 or 3 months. The authorities announced in July that more than 300,000 people were at risk from flooding by the Niger River from the rainwater runoff since heavy rains began in June. The heavy rains have claimed 38 lives across the country as of August 18th, most of which were drownings, according to the emergency services. There were 58 injuries and more than 154,000 people affected.
Moving on, 20 prisoners were shot dead as they attempted to escape from Madagascar's Farafangana prison on Sunday. 8 inmates were wounded in the chaos. A 2018 Amnesty International report of the Madagascar's prison says people accused of a crime are routinely put in a prison, or rather in prison, a pending trial, and can wait for a trial for years with little or no information on their cases, leading to the extraordinary situation where Madagascar's prisons hold more people who have not been convicted more than those who have been found guilty.
Madagascar police have recaptured 11 out of 31 escaped prisoners 1 day after a breakout that ended in a deadly shootout. Police opened fire on scores of inmates trying to flee Farafanga prison on Sunday, capturing 37 but killing 20 and wounding 8 in the process. 31 managed to escape the prison located in the southeast of the Indian Ocean island and was still on the run late on Sunday. The Justice Ministry said 11 of those escapees had since been caught and that one had been found dead, leaving 19 to account for. They took me by the collar and then they tied my hands. I have tried to defend myself, but I'm very small and I was alone. I didn't even have a colleague with me, and that's why I'm covered in blood. There were prisoners on all sides. We are still looking for more than 20 prisoners on the run. Some escaped through the gates and others climbed the wall. Mass prison escapes are not uncommon in Madagascar. In 2016, around 40 detainees broke out from a high-security prison in Tolleri in southern Madagascar. The police and army were called in on Sunday after almost 100 prisoners turned against guards with rocks and a stolen gun. The ministry said the weapon had been recovered and has vowed to boost security at penitentiaries across the country. Nyakundi Calvin, Africa Focus.
Still in the corridors of justice, some 150 people, mostly journalists, gathered in front of the Maison de la Presse in Algiers to demand the release of independent journalist Khalid Drareni, sentenced on August 10th to 3 years in prison for inciting an armed assembly and attack on national unity.
Supporters of the jailed Algerian journalist Khalid Drareni launched an appeal on Wednesday for international pressure to secure the release of someone who has become a symbol of press freedom in the northern African nation. Drareni, a 40 editor of the Casbah Tribune news site and correspondent for French-language channel TV5 Monday, was sentenced on Monday to 3 years in jail for inciting an armed gathering and endangering national unity after covering demonstrations by the Iraq protest movement. He has been in detention since March. Press freedom watchdog Reporters Without Borders, for which Drareni also works, has condemned the sentence as arbitrary, absurd and violent. Drareni's two co-accused in the trial, Iraq protesters Samir Benabi and Slimani Hametouch, were sentenced to 2 years in jail each. Defense lawyers have said they plan to appeal the sentences. The Iraq protesters last year swept ailing President Abdelaziz Bouteflika from power but continued afterwards, demanding the ouster of the entire state apparatus, reviled by the many Algerians as inept and corrupt. Weekly protests rocked Algeria for more than a year and only came to halt in March due to coronavirus crisis. The Khalid Drareni Support Committee today organized his rally for press freedom, for the freedom of Khalid Drareni, who was, as we know, sentenced to 3 years in prison. It is unjust and cruel condemnation. It is a political condemnation.
We are here to ask very strongly the profession and journalists are mobilized to demand the release of Khalid. Khalid, his place is not in prison. His place is the newsroom of his site. His place is with his journalists. It is intolerable that he still remains in prison today.
I hope that justice will review this punishment of which Khalid Drareni was sentenced.
The Algerian system justice has in recent months increased the court cases and convictions against alleged Iraq militants, opposition politicians, journalists and bloggers. Reporters Without Borders ranked Algeria 146 out of 180 countries and territories in its 2020 World Press Freedom Index, 5 places lower than the previous year.
Away from that, the burnt shell remains after large fire ripped through the 139-year-old Grey Street Mosque in South Africa's southeast port city of Durban. The blaze at the mosque, one of the largest in the southern hemisphere, also damaged 3 adjacent buildings in the city's central business district.
According to emergency services and religious leaders, a large fire ripped through the 138-year-old Grey Street Mosque in South Africa's southeastern port city of Durban on Monday. Emergency services spokesman Robert Mackenzie reported that the blaze at the mosque, which is one of the largest in the southern hemisphere, also damaged 3 adjacent buildings in the city's central business district. Videos posted on Twitter showed crowds looking on as curtains of flame reached through the upper floor of the building.
And it caught on so fast it was uncontrollable. And people helped to put the fire out before the fire brigade came. And eventually the fire department came and they ran out of water also. And it took them more than their normal time to put it off. And what's important is that nobody got hurt or burnt or anything. That's the most important. Life was saved.
Firefighters managed to bring the fire under control in about 2 hours before it reached the prayer area on the ground floor. The cause of the fire was not immediately clear, but the South African Muslim Network chairman Faisal Suleiman said it was believed to have started in one of the 7 staff flats located above the mosque and may have been caused by an electrical fault. Mosque workers and their families were all evacuated before the fire spread, and there were no injuries reported.
The fire was so dangerous. So immediately we just grabbed everything inside. We switched off the main power and we just ran. Unfortunately now, as you can see, we are busy cleaning. The shop is full of water.
Yes, yesterday I saw the fire there by the mosque. Yes. Then I was feeling so sad because it was too much. And inside there is a people, but they ran away.
The mosque is a landmark of Durban city centre and a well-attended house of worship, with Suleiman saying it offers space for up to 7,000 at prayer. As well as hosting Friday prayers, it has been visited by prominent figures, including South Africa's late first black president Nelson Mandela, British musician Cat Stevens and former heavyweight boxing champion Muhammad Ali. Nyakundi Kelvin, Africa Focus.
Meanwhile, unidentified assailants in Mozambique have set fire at the headquarters of Canal de Mozambique, an investigative newspaper that angered the government by leaking confidential documents earlier this year. Privately owned Canal de Mozambique probes alleged state corruption and is openly critical of the regime.
Unidentified assailants in Mozambique have set fire to the headquarters of an investigative newspaper that angered the government by leaking confidential documents earlier this year.
A group of people broke the door and threw in homemade bombs, Molotov cocktails with bottles of fuel. Then they drenched the office with fuel and left the bottles. The whole office is gone. The computers, the archives, our administrative documents, and technically, we are here without a newspaper.
The privately owned Canal de Mozambique probes alleged state corruption and is openly critical of the regime.
Looking to the vision of our newspaper, it is a newspaper that focuses on investigations, so possibly some people in this society are not comfortable with the work that we are doing. So that's why they reacted like this. We have no doubt that this is a terrorist attack against democracy, freedom of the press and of expression, against journalism and journalists.
Public prosecutors sued the paper in June after it circulated confidential contracts between the government and Liquefied Natural Gas Exploration Company in the restive northern Cabo Delgado region.
I hope that the police will get to the bottom of this. Not solving this means tearing up the constitution, our system of governance. The victim is not only Canal de Mozambique. It isn't simply the journalists. It is we, the people.
The leaked documents showed plans to send troops to protect the companies from insurgents that have been wreaking havoc in the area since 2017. Fatma Ngwena, Switch TV.
On to other news. There is no immediate oil damage to coral reefs of Mauritius after a major oil spill caused by a Japanese ship, but long-term threats remain, including to the area's delicate mangroves. The assessment came after a report that the Japanese ship behind the spill crashed into the reef after its crew steered it close to shore in a bid to get mobile network.
サンゴ礁のリーフ内で座礁地点に近い場所からオイルが流出したと推定される場所
We snorkeled and inspected 12 points in the area from the coral reef to the ship's stranding point.
We did not find any corals that have obviously died from the oil spill. We did not see any places where oil accumulated on coral or the sea bottom. However, the water was more cloudy towards the stranding point. We believe that this is because the ship is being rocked in waves and destroying corals.
これは座礁船が波で動いて、サンゴ礁を破砕することで生じていると考えられます。この状態が長期間継続することで、
If this situation continues for a long time, it will impose stress on the corals and possibly kill it. Now it's winter here, but when the water temperature goes up in summer, the stress from this situation on these corals will further increase.
海水温の上昇と重なって、さらにストレスが高まると考えられます。今後ですね、濁りが継続することで死亡する。
If the clouding of the water continues, it may kill the corals. Intensive monitoring will be necessary before making necessary measures.
モニタリング結果に基づきですね、必要な対策を講じていく必要があると思います。オイルが漂着したとされる。
We also inspected several points in the coastal area where the oil has contaminated the mangrove forests.
7カ所を調査しました。オイル汚染がひどい場所では、今後呼吸根に
In the places where the oil contamination is severe, the mangroves may get its breathing roots get covered by oil and suffocated to death or die from the poison released from the oil contamination.
その毒性物質により死亡する可能性があります。
はい、そうです。サンゴ礁に座礁していますので、その座
The
礁
ship
し
is
ている
stranded
部
on
分が
coral systems and destroying the creatures, creating clouds in the water inside the coral reef.
で、ダクトとして中に入ってきているのではないかと考えております。
Time to take a breather. Stay with us here on Africa Focus. Still to come. Sudan military and civilian rulers trade blame for economy. Welcome back to Africa Focus. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Moving on, allegations of money laundering and attempts to destabilize Botswana made against ex-president Ian Khama are baseless, according to British law firm Omnia Strategy. Khama, who ruled Botswana for 10 years from 2008, is accused alongside two others, that is a former intelligence chief and a South African businesswoman, of laundering more than $10 billion in public funds. The money was intended to fund opposition political parties and stoke political unrest in the southern African country, according to Botswana prosecutors.
The regime here has engaged in perjury by fabricating a false scenario of money laundering into offshore accounts by named individuals and institutions. Their clear criminal intent has now been exposed. Our hard-earned reputation of good governance and respect for the rule of law has now been ruined as a result of a very clumsy and irresponsible conduct and actions of a regime desperate to try and legitimize itself, tarnish the reputation of those targeted, and settle petty political scores. Personally, I and the other victims of this farce will be instituting the necessary legal action against this regime.
Meanwhile, restaurants reopen in Algiers after 5 months of closure due to the coronavirus pandemic, while making sure they implement hygiene and social distancing rules when welcoming customers. This comes after its government eases more COVID-19 restrictions, in addition to opening of large mosques, reopening of beaches, along with entertainment venues, hotels, restaurants and cafes.
When we receive the customer, they can only enter if they are authorized, as waiting is not allowed inside the restaurant. Once they are allowed to enter, they have to wipe their feet on a disinfectant mat. They have to put the hydroalcoholic gel on their hands. Then they are taken to their table, and there is a distance of at least 1.5 meters between each table, but I always try to do more. I didn't expect so many people, but I think people are fed up, so they go out a lot. But of course, I'm very particular about respecting the protocols, which are very important. It is true that people sometimes take it badly, but I'm forced to do it. But I prefer that to something going wrong or to closing my restaurant.
With my experience as a doctor, with just 6 months of the COVID pandemic, I don't know if it's time to deconfine. As a doctor, I don't know. But as a civilian Algerian, I feel that people will surely need to deconfine after spending 6 months at home, because people are going to explode at home. We like it. Deconfinement is a good thing. People can let off steam, go out and enjoy themselves.
Elsewhere, the King of Morocco, Mohammed VI, expressed concern over the recent uptick in coronavirus infections, calling on citizens to be more vigilant and avoid confinement in the North African country. Morocco has confirmed a total of over 70,000, or rather 47,500 cases of novel coronavirus, including 775 deaths.
Moroccan authorities Thursday slapped tight control measures on movement in Casablanca and Marrakesh, the North African country's economic and tourist capitals, following a spike in coronavirus cases. Several beaches were closed in Casablanca, Morocco's largest city with 3.3 million inhabitants, following similar measures imposed near the capital of Rabat. Partial lockdown was ordered in Rabat and the port city of Tagias, with armored vehicles deployed on the streets and police manning checkpoints.
Dear people, in spite of the efforts made, the pandemic is still raging and the fight, still unfinished, is still taking place in a difficult and unprecedented context. Certainly, you are held up as an example for compliance with preventive measures and for the convincing results we achieved during the containment period. The reality is that a significant part of the population is not complying with the preventive health measures adopted by the public authorities, such as wearing masks, respecting the rules of social distancing, using hygiene and disinfection products. In fact, in the aftermath of the end of the lockdown, the number of confirmed cases, serious cases and deaths increased in a short period of time, more than 3 times compared to the lockdown period. If this upward trend continues, the scientific commission in charge of monitoring the evolution of COVID-19 could recommend a return to lockdown or even a tightening of sanitary measures. If, God forbid, this difficult decision were to be taken, its social and economic repercussions will be harsh for all citizens.
COVID-19 infections have been on the rise since the start of August and now exceed 1,000 new cases per day in the country of 35 million. Morocco has confirmed a total of over 47,500 cases of novel coronavirus, including 775 deaths. Health Minister Khalid Aid Talib, who has come under fire on social media, acknowledges the sector needs another 62,000 paramedics and 30,000 medical staffs.
And that's all here on Africa Focus, but keep the conversation going on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya, at Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Chacha. My name is Joel Chacha and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Until next time, do have yourself a great day.